you for joining me. My name is Tim Rumsey, and this is another presentation in the Liberty on the Line series. Tonight, our topic is Land of Liberty. We're going to be studying the first half of Revelation chapter 13. We will study the second half in the future. Let's begin with this question. What power did John the Revelator see rising out of the ocean or coming out of the sea? We'll read from Revelation chapter 13, beginning in verse number 1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So we see some interesting symbols here, and they are symbols that are drawn from the book of Daniel. Daniel received a very similar vision where he had seen a lion which represented Babylon. That is repeated in Revelation. Daniel had also seen a bear which represented Medo-Persia. This also is in the passage from Revelation that we just read. Daniel then had seen a leopard which represented Greece. And finally, Daniel had seen a beast that defied description by name. Maybe it looked like a dinosaur. He simply calls it a beast, and this also is what John says he sees rising up out of the ocean. It is interesting and important that John and Daniel name these animals or the parts of the animals in opposite order. So Daniel first says he sees a lion, then a bear, then a leopard, and then a beast. John lists them in the reverse order. First, he says a beast rises out of the sea, and it resembles a leopard, and it resembles a bear, and it resembles a lion. So why would they list these animals in opposite order? And the answer is because God is showing them the same history, but from opposite directions. So Daniel was looking forward in time before most of this history happened. So God shows him Babylon first, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, and then finally Rome. By the time John receives his vision, most of that history has already happened. And so he sees the beast first, and then further back in time, he sees the leopard, which is Greece. Further back than that is the bear of Medo-Persia, and then way back in history is the lion or Babylon. Now, this understanding of prophecy is not something new. It's not something original or private with myself. This is how Christians have understood Daniel and Revelation and the great outline of Bible prophecy for literally thousands of years. Hippolytus, one of the very earliest Christians, wrote this: "The golden head of the image and the lioness denoted the Babylonians. The shoulders and arms of silver and the bear represented the Persians and the Medes. The belly and the thighs of brass and the leopard meant the Greeks, who held the sovereignty from Alexander's time. The legs of iron and the beast, dreadful and terrible, expressed the Romans, who hold the sovereignty at present." Now, this beast power is a big player in Bible prophecy. It is central to the prophecies of Revelation, especially the central prophecies of Revelation chapters 12, 13, and 14 that describe what happens just before Jesus returns. But this beast also goes by other names in Bible prophecy. In the book of Daniel, it is referred to as a little horn. And we find it in other places as well, called the man of sin or the son of perdition. Let's keep reading from Revelation chapter 13 and verse number 3. "And I saw one of his heads," this is the beast, "as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast." So at some point in this beast's experience in history, historically speaking, there will be a deadly wound or a major blow to its power politically and spiritually. Remember, if you were with us in our previous presentation, we saw that Babylon at the end of time, of which the beast is a central part, Babylon is a combination of political and church power united together, cooperating together. So for this beast to receive a deadly wound, it must receive a wound politically as well as spiritually. Now, there is a time prophecy that connects in with this prophecy in verse 3, and here's what the time prophecy says. "There was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue for 42 months. Now, this time prophecy of 42 months is mentioned several times in the Bible. We find it mentioned in the book of Daniel more than once, and we find it mentioned in the book of Revelation more than once. Just like the names of the beast, the way of expressing this time prophecy also is given in several different ways. We just read about 42 months, but it is also expressed in other verses as a time, times, and half a time, or as 1,260 days. All of these time periods represent the same amount of time, and here's how. In Bible prophecy, one time equals 1 year. There are 360 days in a prophetic year. So one time would be 360 days. 3.5 times, therefore, would be 1,260 days. 42 months is the same thing. There are 30 days in a prophetic month, and you do the multiplication. 42 months of 30 days each equals 1,260 days. Now, in Bible prophecy, these apocalyptic prophecies, time is also symbolic. It's not literal time that is usually expressed. It is prophetic time or symbolic time. And 1 day in prophecy represents 1 year of literal time. So the Bible is telling us that this beast power, which combines church and state together, it's not just a fleeting thing that passes on the face of this earth. It is something that is here for a long, long time. And just how long is it here? Well, the Bible tells us 1,260 years. And here is how this played out historically. In the year 533 AD, the Roman Emperor Justinian made a decree that unilaterally set the Roman bishop as the head of all the Christian churches. That Roman bishop became known as the Pope, the Roman Pope. He received his political power as well as much of his ecclesiastical power from the Roman emperor. Remember, iron and clay united together in the feet of the image. There was just one problem. In the year 533 AD, Rome was surrounded by an invading army of the Ostrogoths that were besieging the city of Rome. There was not much the Pope, or anybody for that matter, could do to really start exercising the power that had been given to him. That siege was broken in the year 538. And from that year onward, the Pope in Rome began exercising more and more power through much of the Middle Ages, uniting the powers of church and state together. Now, if you do the math, 1,260 years after 538 AD brings us to the year 1798. In that exact year, exactly on time, according to Bible prophecy, Napoleon's army marched into Rome. They took the Pope captive, took him back in exile to France, where the Pope died a year later. Now, the Pope may have been taken captive and the Pope may have died, but of course the church continued. Nothing happened to the Roman Catholic Church. It didn't disappear. But here's what did happen. The political power and influence that the papacy had exercised to greater or lesser degrees for over 1,000 years in Europe was effectually broken by Napoleon's army when they took the Pope captive. And through all of the 1800s, there was very little to no political power and influence that the papacy was able to establish. In fact, by the 1870s, the papacy was at an all-time low. The papal states had been taken by Italy. That was all reversed in the year 1929 when the Lateran Treaty was signed between Italy and the papacy, forming Vatican City, the smallest autonomous sovereign nation in the world today. And the wound began to be healed there in 1929. Now, that's the first beast that Revelation chapter 13 talks about. There is another beast that Revelation chapter 13 describes to us, and we're going to study that one next because it ends up working with the first beast. So our question, what power does John see rise from the earth? Remember, the first beast rises out of the sea. The second beast rises out of the earth. So let's read Revelation chapter 13 and verse number 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb. Now, we're going to take some of these identifying marks step by step. The first one is this. This beast arises after the first beast sometime around the year 1798. Again, 1798 was the year that the first beast, the beast out of the sea, or the papal power, received its deadly wound. According to Revelation chapter 13, the second beast will arise out of the earth shortly after or around the same time that that first beast receives its deadly wound. Now, several decades before the end of that time prophecy in 1798, John Wesley, one of the founders of the Methodist Church, he was studying his Bible, he was studying Bible prophecy, and he came across these exact prophecies. And he wrote this fascinating statement in the year 1754. He, meaning the second beast, is not yet come, though he cannot be far off, for he is to appear at the end of the 42 months of the first beast. So even before 1798, careful, sincere Bible students and Bible scholars who were reading the Bible and praying for understanding, they recognized that something significant was about to happen in the world. Now, we are going to see that this second beast that comes up out of the earth is the United States. The United States declared its independence in the year 1776. It won its freedom in the year 1783. Its Constitution was signed in 1787, but in the year 1798, exactly on schedule, the United States first engaged in foreign military conflict with the nation of France, the exact same nation that had dealt the deadly wound to the first beast. Here is another identifying mark of this second beast or power that arises on the earth. It comes out of the earth in a relatively unpopulated area. Now, how do we know that? Well, in the Bible prophecy, and especially in Revelation, much of it is written in symbols. So when the first beast comes out of the water, that represents something, and the Bible tells us what that represents. Revelation 17 verse 15 says, "The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So water represents many people. Therefore, a wilderness area where there is not much water must represent a place where there are not many people. And that, of course, fitly represented the North American landmass about the time that the United States appeared. Now, the Bible also tells us that this power will grow to possess worldwide influence, military power, and economic control. In verse 14 of Revelation 13, it says, "It deceiveth them that dwell on the earth." To deceive somebody, you must have some level of influence over them. If you don't care at all what I say, you're not going to listen to me, and I have no power to deceive you. So this power must have influence in many different ways over all of the earth. Verse 16 tells us that this second beast that comes up out of the earth causes all to receive the mark of the beast. That indicates physical power or force, military power. This must be a worldwide military power that is truly a superpower. And verse 17 of Revelation chapter 13 tells us that this man causes that no man might buy or sell unless they receive the mark of the beast. So here is economic power and control as well on a worldwide global scale. There are not many nations or countries or powers of any kind that can continue checking off all of the check boxes that we are seeing here in Revelation chapter 13. Here is a fourth and final identifying mark of this second beast or power that rises out of the earth. It has two horns like a lamb. Now, why are these two horns significant? Well, the first beast that rises out of the sea is represented in the book of Daniel as a little horn, a single horn that arises out of the fourth beast of Rome. That little horn combined the powers of church and state together. But in this second power, the United States, those powers of church and state are represented as two separate individual horns. In other words, those powers of church and state have been separated and divided. There is a wall of separation, which is exactly how this nation has been set up and has for many, many years valued the freedom of conscience and freedom of worship that are protected by our First Amendment. Roger Williams, who founded the colony of Rhode Island, understood very well the importance of freedom of conscience and the separation of church and state. One history book says this about him: "The fundamental principle of Roger Williams's colony was that every man should have liberty to worship God according to the light of his own conscience. His little state, Rhode Island, became the asylum of the oppressed, and it increased and prospered until its foundation principles, civil and religious liberty, became the cornerstone of the American Republic." We have a great debt of gratitude to this man, Roger Williams, and the smallest state that he founded, Rhode Island. Those principles have become the bedrock principles of the United States of America, guaranteeing liberty of conscience, speech, freedom of worship for every person who lives here. George Washington said this: If I had the least idea of any difficulty resulting from the Constitution adopted by the convention of which I had the honor to be president, when it was framed, so as to endanger the rights of any religious denomination, I should never have attached my name to that instrument. If I had any idea that the general government was so administered that the liberty of conscience was endangered, I pray you be assured that no man would be more willing than myself to revise and alter that part of it, so as to avoid all religious persecution. You can without doubt remember that I have often expressed as my opinion that every man who conducts himself as a good citizen is accountable alone to God for his religious faith and should be protected in worshiping God according to the dictates of his conscience. George Washington also understood the importance of liberty of conscience, of freedom of worship, not just to believe what you wish, but to express that belief in action as well. He was not alone in this opinion. Thomas Jefferson wrote this: "Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislatures should make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state." The two horns of this second beast that arises out of the earth represent that separation of church and state. The Bible also mentions that those horns have no crown on them. Most of the other horns mentioned on the beasts and animals in Revelation have crowns on them. A crown, of course, is worn by a king, a man, a person that sits in power at the top of the pyramid. These two horns are different. They represent a religious power that has no pope and a political power that has no king. And that is how this nation was established. John Adams wrote this: "I have long been decided in opinion that a free government and the Roman Catholic religion can never exist together in any nation or country. Liberty and popery cannot live together." Now that is a pretty strong statement, but John Adams was not alone in that opinion about the dangers to free government that would come from this first beast power that rises out of the sea, the papal system. Abraham Lincoln once said this: "I do not pretend to be a prophet, but though not a prophet, I see a very dark cloud on our horizon, and that dark cloud is coming from Rome. It is filled with tears of blood. It will rise and increase, till its flanks will be torn by a flash of lightning, followed by a fearful peal of thunder. Then a cyclone such as the world has never seen will pass over this country, spreading ruin and desolation from north to south. Neither I nor you, but our children, will see these things." These men who understood so well the purpose for which our country was set up, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom in the political sphere as well, they understood where the danger came from as they looked back in history. Let me share one final statement with you. This was from the French General Marquis de Lafayette, who fought alongside the Americans in the American Revolution. And here's what he said: "It is my opinion that if the liberties of this country, the United States of America, are destroyed, it will be by the subtlety of the Roman Catholic Jesuit priests, for they are the most crafty, dangerous enemies to civil and religious liberty. They have instigated most of the wars in Europe." So it's very clear as we read these statements where these men stood on their opinion to the danger that would come to the United States. At what point would it, if it started losing its freedoms and liberties, according to them, where should we look first for the cause of that? They were very clear what their opinion was. And just to be fair, we should ask somebody on the other side of this equation what their opinion was of the United States Constitution and the way that this nation had been set up. So here is Pope Pius IX writing in 1864 in regards to the United States Constitution. He condemned that erroneous opinion, most fatal in its effects on the Catholic Church and the salvation of souls, that liberty of conscience and worship is each man's personal right, which ought to be legally proclaimed and asserted in every rightly constituted society, and that a right resides in the citizens to an absolute liberty, which should be restrained by no authority, whether ecclesiastical or civil, whereby they may be able openly and publicly to manifest and declare any of their ideas whatever, either by word of mouth, by the press, or in any other way. So he is just as clear as Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Marquis de Lafayette. He is just as clear in his opinion as to the dangers that he sees that the freedoms of the United States will have on the Catholic Church's desire to unite church and state together. Now, next question. Who does the beast from the earth end up working with? Revelation chapter 13, verse 12 says this, "And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." Now, we're going to look at a little bit more history to see if this has indeed happened. Has this part of the prophecy been fulfilled, or is it in fulfillment right now? And to really understand this in perspective, let me share with you a statement that John F. Kennedy said in 1960 when he was running for the President of the United States. He said, "I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president, who happens also to be a Catholic. I do not speak for my church on public matters, and the church does not speak for me." John F. Kennedy made it very clear that even though he was a Roman Catholic, if he was president, he would not put into place the church's politics. He would not advance the church's policies. In fact, he would try to distance himself, distance his faith from his work in the political sphere. The Bible prophecy tells us that these two powers, the United States and the papacy, will end up uniting together, becoming allies, and working together. And this is exactly what happened during the 1980s in their common fight against communism. There was, in the early 1990s, an article in Time called Holy Alliance, which brought to light this secret alliance that had been going on for years between President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II. Here's what the author said. "Only President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II were present in the Vatican Library on Monday, June 7, 1982. It was the first time the two had met, and they talked for 50 minutes. In that meeting, Reagan and the Pope agreed to undertake a clandestine campaign to hasten the dissolution of the communist empire. Declares Richard Allen, Reagan's first national security advisor, this was one of the great secret alliances of all time." Now, the deadly wound that was given to the papal power in 1798 by Napoleon began to be reversed or healed in 1929 when Italy gave back the Papal States with the Lateran Treaty. It received a big boost during the 1980s with this alliance with the United States, exactly in accordance and fulfillment of Bible prophecy. So where are we today? Let's look at a few more statements from some of our most recent presidents in regards to their opinion, not only about the Catholic Church or the Pope, but in their willingness to implement the policies and agendas of that power. We'll start with George W. Bush. "The best way to honor Pope John Paul II, truly one of the great men, is to take his teachings seriously. It is to listen to his words and put his teachings into action here in America. This is a challenge we must accept." President Barack Obama in 2015 said this, "I welcome His Holiness Pope Francis's encyclical and deeply admire the Pope's decision to make the case clearly, powerfully, and with the full moral authority of his position. I believe the United States must be a leader in this effort, which is why I am committed to taking bold actions at home and abroad." President Obama was very clear that not only did he endorse the positions that Pope Francis had taken, and this was especially in regards to his encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si', he wanted to actually see the United States be a leader in implementing the papal agenda. Again, this is exactly what Bible prophecy says will happen in Revelation chapter 13. President Biden said this when he met Pope Francis. He explained the gift coins that he had given to the Pope are given to warriors and leaders, and called Francis the most significant warrior for peace that I have ever met. So what we are seeing in just the last few years is a radical shift from the earlier attitude and understanding of our nation's leaders in regarding to its relationship, our nation's relationship with the papal power. And remember, we are talking about systems. We are not talking about individual people who may happen to be members of the Roman Catholic Church. That is a completely different matter. There are many wonderful people that are part of that church. We are talking about global powers and their fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Now, what happens when the two beasts unite together? Revelation chapter 13 explains this in verse 15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. The Bible tells us that when these two powers, the United States and the papal power, end up uniting together, collaborating, working together, when the United States begins pushing the agenda and the policies of the first beast, it will result in an image of the beast. Now, what does that mean? It means a reflection of what existed before in the Middle Ages, when church and state were united together, and those who opposed were pushed out of society, exiled, or even killed. That is what the Bible is telling us in verse 15. What will the image of the beast result in? Verse 16 goes on, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. The mark of the beast will be the culmination of this combination of church and state power working together. And God wants you to be prepared for it. He wants you to understand the issues involved. The issues with the mark of the beast are deep, they are significant, they are rooted in liberty of conscience, they are worshiped in your freedom and your ability to worship and serve God as you see fit based on your relationship with God and your reading of the Bible. We're going to study the mark of the beast in a future episode. I hope that you won't miss it. You need to understand from the Bible exactly what the mark of the beast is. And I promise you, you will, as we study from the Bible will explain itself. You will have no questions exactly what the issues are related with the mark of the beast. If you'd like to study more about the topics that we are going over in this series, Liberty on the Line, please follow the QR code on the screen or the description in the video if you're watching on social media. We would love to send you a free copy of the Bible studies that will help you understand for yourself the things that we are studying. Thank you for studying with me tonight. I hope that you'll join me again next time for Liberty on the Line as we continue our study of Bible prophecy.